don't normally start videos this way, but I have spent basically the entire month of October completely restructuring the studio. I may have a whole separate video detailing this. It may be part of this video. I'm not sure. I've been trying my hardest to restructure the studio yet again in a way that gets out of my way for making videos. The past couple years, I have blamed a lot for my inability to make videos or to make good videos or to keep up. In case y'all haven't noticed, I have not kept up with releases, with new gear, new whatever videos in a very long time. And I've blamed a lot of things. YouTube algorithm issues, having a kid taking away a lot of time, ADHD, all of those things compound. All of those things play a role. But I think finally, as I've been redoing my studio yet again, and I've been watching a lot of, I know I shouted him out in one of my last big videos, but I'm going to do it again. Tom Buck. Dude is just a legend, huge positive force in this space. I'm realizing that by watching his kind of video, where he can just spin these things up really quickly, one of the things I run into is that I get genuinely anxious when I try to think about making gear videos, because this is actually the cleanest it's been in 3 weeks. But you see under there, you see all the cables back there. This is my power supplies bin. There's stuff everywhere. And most of that is just stuff I need to put away. I'm still working on that. But if we take a look, for example, underneath what is supposed to be my movable B-roll table, I just have piles of stuff. That is all review samples. I've got a couple review-y things to make videos on over there. If we run past my pile of keyboards I need to sort through, again, I'm cleaning. This is not the normal state of the studio. This is me cleaning up, but a lot of that is Goodwill stuff. Some of this I need to find homes for. But if we take a peek behind the shuttered curtain, if you will, review and project stuff. That entire shelf is review units and project stuff. Review. I think what I've not realized, or at least not fully accepted, is that I am completely overwhelmed when it comes to gear coverage, when it comes to product coverage, when it comes to new videos that require me to engage with something else. I am the bottleneck. There is nothing else to blame. But also, new gear comes out so often now. I say no to so many review units. What you see piling up is just the things I said yes to, either because I felt some obligation to cover them at some point, at which point the time has already passed. I don't have the content obligation to cover anymore because the relevance has gone down, but yet I've already received the thing, so I have the obligation to cover it anyway now, at least the way I feel about it, or things that I really think would be cool to show off. Gear comes out so often, and so much of it is not different enough from the things that have come out before, that my process for covering things slows and slows every year. Either because I need to find a way to cover it in a more unique way that makes it more interesting to watch, a more entertaining video to perform well, or to make the product seem interesting because, hey, it's another microphone, another camera, another mixer, whatever. Or because I'm constantly trying to do these bigger projects and change my setup and improve my workflow, I don't have a clean, easy space to just sit down and start filming these one-off videos. And I think it's a self-feeding cycle because those videos are less interesting to me. I don't prioritize having the space for them enough. That is something that the new space I'm working on is hopefully going to allow me some freedom in general, because it will give me cleaner sets to work with in a more organized space. But I'm realizing as this project has gone on multiple weeks longer than I expected, the problem is not my set. I have a bunch of different sets. I love them to death. You all seem to respond positively to them. The problem is not necessarily my space, although having a second floor where I had a dedicated editing office and could push a bunch of this stuff into a clean, just locked in A-roll set might be cool. a lot of the problem comes in the sheer overwhelm of gear, of products to review. Those things don't have homes in my space. I don't have, in all of my studio, I don't have a storage space because there's no closets. This is just a garage. My attic is completely full already of just archive stuff. Stuff that I will need to get rid of, I guess, at some point. But, archive stuff that I'm trying to keep longer term. I cycle stuff in and out of it all the time. Other than the shelves I showed you where I try to shove everything in. And speaking of, I mentioned earlier my ADHD, out of sight, out of mind, I lose track of those things more frequently. I get piles and piles of things to cover, which I know I'm complaining about the dream scenario for when I started the shop. I get it. But I have piles of these things that are effectively a to-do list that need to sit here as a to-do list that inherently don't have a home because they don't live in my studio. It is a product I need to cover and then either archive a little bit for future comparisons or redistribute back to you all in some way. I was planning on doing a bunch of gear giveaways for this month is my 10-year anniversary of being full-time. I expected to do some stuff for that, and that has not come up. Part of the lack of organization, part of the clutter, part of me getting kind of trapped feeling of not being able to clean up and clear stuff out to do cool. Tom has this dedicated space where he has all these clean, nice looking multicam setups that used to be what I wanted to do. And I hit a point a couple years ago, I think, where the backlog of gear reviews piled up so high, I started being embarrassed to show the extra angles of my space. I started really controlling what you see in my A-roll and stuff because everything else was just piled just out of frame. And that's happening here too. Again, I think I went through a year or two ago a phase where we just threw out a bunch of review samples. I gave them away to you all. I returned them to companies. I donated them to Goodwill or whatever. I'm doing that again with some stuff. And like I said, I'll be giving away a bunch of gear for the 10-year anniversary soon. I don't know when yet. I do want to, I have a mountain of USB microphones that I'm just going to cover all in one video, but I just haven't had the clear space to set them all up and do that kind of video. And my desk is always, I've got notebooks and ongoing projects I tinker with and my iPad and my music stuff. It is never clear. It's, some of the problem is me, and I'm not asking for personal help or anything in this, and your comments on that will frankly mostly be ignored. That's not what this is for, but I want to express my feeling of connection with that, with the broader problem of consumerism in this space. I watched a video from someone recently, I have it linked below, I don't remember their name offhand, where they talked about how they have 8 different cameras, or maybe 9 or 10 that they acquired over the past 10 years of doing YouTube videos and stuff. And the gear acquisition syndrome. And they're getting rid of them all because they just want to do their photography, and they've been so locked into the YouTube culture of buying all these cameras that their focus on their photography is kind of faltered because they have all this extra stuff and they only really need the one thing. And I've kind of gone through that, both because I needed the money and because I wasn't using my multicam setups. I sold most of my extra cameras. All my Sony cameras are gone. I've got my Canon R5C, which is my main big boy cinema camera. I've got the R6 I bought to be my locked off A-roll camera on my Rolly cart. I've got a GH5S in my Elgato prompter there that I don't even stream very much. I don't use a ton at the moment. And then I've got my Fuji I use for photos. And other than goofy little GoPros and Insta360 whatevers, those are my only modern real cameras these days. I don't have the fancy overhead camera rig or the 3-point multicam setup that I streamed with in the retro room or whatever. And I'm trying to get back to that, and we're using more broadcast gear for that. I'm potentially working with OBS Bot to cover their new PTZ stuff. I've got the bird dog stuff that I live and swear by that I use that will integrate more. But in terms of the fancy mirrorless cameras and stuff, I've really slimmed down. But a lot of that is because I've just been so wrapped up in all the stuff there is to cover, it becomes impossible. And something I've run into, I have an entire big plastic bag full of generic capture cards that I had originally acquired in 2021 when capture card coverage was going crazy and I was going to cover every generic capture card on the market. I probably spent $500, probably more, that's not even that much, on Amazon on these generic capture cards so I could cover them for you all. And by the time I started getting around to them, that kind of coverage doesn't do well anymore. And half of the cheap products on Amazon stop selling after they sell 1,000 units or whatever. And so I have a pile of stuff that I never reviewed that there is no point to covering anymore. And I'm just donating like a whole big bag of generic capture cards completely unopened to Goodwill. And like I got sent a new microphone. I'm not going to say which company. I have a bunch of USB, like I said, I have a bunch of USB microphones to review. I got sent one from a company who then within a couple weeks of me agreeing to be sent the microphone, they had another email blast for a second model they're releasing to cover. And I didn't even respond to that one because, like, there's so much cheap stuff being grifted on this platform. There's so much crap gear going around. And I think back to the gear that I really use and love. I think back to the audio hardware. Like, my favorite microphone for a long time was the Electro Voice RE20. That thing's like 50 years old, probably more at this point. It was probably 50 years old before my timeline adjusts because, you know, the 70s were 30 years ago. The SM7B is like 70 years old or something, the SM7. And then like the good pieces of gear last the test of time and stay around a long time. The MKH416 has been the like legendary microphone for a very long time. And I firmly believe the Earthworks Ethos will be that microphone for a very long time, which is part of why like I painted mine up and I got it all fancy. And that's kind of my main microphone. Obviously camera bodies are a little different because the specs change so often and stuff. But like my R5C, when am I ever going to need to upgrade that? I've got full frame, 45 megapixel stills, 8K video, 8K 60 video. Like, at no point will the specs of that ever bottleneck me in my career, probably. Unless we all switch to 3D immersive spatial Apple Vision Pro video as the dominating platform, I will never need to change that. Now, there are some other features that I want. And so I have actually pre-ordered my first camera ever. I'm not going to tell you what it is yet, because I think it would replace a couple of the cameras I use. It would be my new main A cam. It does open gate. So that's the only limitation I really feel with my Canon R5C is the lack of open gate, just for the kinds of formats I record. And it's a lot smaller. So I think it'll replace like 2 or 3 cameras, and I can just sell those and get rid of them and condense them into one. But my main camera, like, that's going to be my 10-year camera. I don't need to upgrade it. So every time a new Sony whatever or whatever comes out, I'm just like, I don't see the appeal. Save up for something good or buy it used and use it for a very long time and stop the ridiculous upgrade cycle. So obviously, I still have a bunch of gear reviews I need to get through. I still have my backlog, and I'm going to try. Like I said, I have been spending every workday I have, which is not a ton. My kiddo was just on fall break, so, you know, we've been traveling and a bunch of other stuff, but like every ounce of work time that I have, other than making sure I have a video on one of my channels every week, has been spent trying to redo this studio office and get it organized and get it cleaned up. And it's really stressful. It's really exhausting with all the little details. But my goal is to just turn through the gear reviews I have now and then really slow down. I've been reading. I don't have it with me. On my trip to TwitchCon, I always take a book with me and start reading a book. The book I took with me to start was Digital Minimalism. I don't remember the author. I'll throw it up on screen. And it very much represents the technological trend that's been taking off these days and the journey that I've been on for quite a few years now of slimming down, going back to basics. And one of the things it talks about is that you can still adopt new technologies if it has an impact on your life, but you need to take the time to evaluate, does it have a positive impact that you want on your life? And is it the best option to have that impact on your life? And I think I'm going to apply that to my review samples. I think I am going to take that approach where before I agree to review something, I'm no longer considering views. My gear reviews don't perform that well. My viewership has imploded on gear coverage for years now. Ever since YouTube made quite a few changes, like mid-pandemic, gear coverage just has never done super great for me. And so I'm going to evaluate, do I see something truly innovative and meaningful, and can I offer a unique perspective on it? Or would it be meaningful enough to my workflow to make it worth me adopting and then showcasing how I adopted it. And if not, I'm probably just going to say no. I think that's the play. I'm overwhelmed. I am exhausted by the constant gear cycle, and I think it's harming everyone's creativity. I think so many creators who got into this field to make cool stuff, to travel, to do all these things, are still able to do it, but it's become a byproduct of peddling gear every 6 months. And it's not what any of us have wanted. And it's we siphon off our creativity when we focus so much on that aspect, because it's just a big cycle of sales. Obviously, my whole career has been focused on a free program. OBS, has been focused on a free program that anyone can use and getting the most out of it and getting the most out of what you have. And I'm always going to stick to that. And I think it's time that that becomes the lesson and not just the afterthought. Especially going to TwitchCon. I don't think I had any video of it, but the OBS team had a table at TwitchCon. I got to go meet a couple of the devs and chat with them for a few minutes. That was amazing. I'd never met anyone who worked on OBS, but they had a little tiny table next to GDQ that GDQ just let them have for TwitchCon. An entire industry held up on the backs of OBS. They're not the big center thing. They don't have a big show unless someone instead it was Chevron and Capcom. And then all these little companies that profit from OBS's work and their development. And that just really stood out to me. I don't know. The OBS devs probably don't need a big booth or a big table or what. What are they gonna? They're not selling you anything. What are they gonna be like? Hey, come try OBS. I get it. But I think it was really symbolic to me of where things are right now, where it's all about more, and getting all these new things to live the streamer lifestyle. Instead of streaming being this cool new thing you can do with the stuff you already have, which is what it was when I got into it. And I think there's a lot of perspective shift that needs to happen here with that. You'll still have normal videos for me. I know things have been weird. I just wanted to provide a channel update. I don't do these very often. If you're interested, in the spirit of all of this, I've done a big write-up of basically my new philosophy for Patreon and Floatplane. I'm back on Floatplane, by the way. Fan funding related things. I've combined all of those efforts of my different channels into one platform, so you don't have to pick and choose if you want to, or support multiple. If you want to support my art, my music, my gaming channel, which has been popping off. Thank you so much. The tech channel, it's all just in one place. And it's just the core message of that is you, especially if you've been following me for the length of my career, I've been teaching streaming for over 10 years. If you trust me to do what you followed me for, then just sign up, because you can trust that I will make the decisions to continue doing that. Otherwise, whatever, no big deal. Speaking of Patreon, I'm interrupting this real quick. I'll get back to what I was saying, but I forgot to mention, even if you don't want to support me financially, which is totally fine for obvious reasons, I will be using the free access of Patreon to act as a sort of newsletter service, so that if instead of doing a traditional email newsletter or whatever, I'll just be writing updates and things like that there. So if you want to hear more from me, see behind the scenes, that is something you can follow and just get behind the scenes updates and those kinds of things, explanations of what's going on, updates to the shop, yada, yada, previews of the studio, those kinds of things. And just in general, with the way certain social media platforms have been going, I'll have links to everywhere you can find me in the description below. My website, the 90s style website, EposVox.com, is a great place to start. I am on Mastodon. I am trying to use Blue Sky more, which is something. I'm on Threads. I don't use it a ton. It's been a miserable place so far. And obviously Discord and the forums, demodisc.zone. Come chat in the forums. I want more activity there, more long form, thoughtful discussions instead of hot takes. Anyway, back to the original finish of this video. But there are different platforms. There's Floatplane, there's Patreon, there's channel memberships on YouTube, there's the Discord subs. You have options if you want to subscribe. But otherwise, I just wanted to provide a public channel update and a statement about the state of gear, because there's a lot of cool, new, innovative gear. Some of my favorite gear has been the OBSBot and the Insta360 webcams that do the auto tracking. The big fancy bird dog gear, everything being network oriented, is pretty cool, even though latency and sync is an issue. There's been obviously the new NVINC stuff and the split encoding, which is in the new OBS beta, which I still have to cover, in the new NVIDIA graphics cards, and obviously the affordability of the encoding on the ARC graphics cards. There's been that new AMD Xilinx encoder card that's really cool that I haven't gotten to play around enough with. There's tons of cool, innovative gear things, but it's all in a massive swarm of everything else. And I think it's time we filter that a lot more. I don't know if you're with me or not. Everything's a mess. I have built up so much friction to making content that I just wanted to put this out there. I've got some gear for sale and some giveaways happening over on Discord, linked below. Remember to be kind, rewind. Normal videos soon. Also, this has all been shot on the iPhone 16 Pro. I did not buy that to buy into the gear cycle. I was using a very old iPhone 12 where the video features were really kind of hampering my ability to make content with it. Like, I really just wasn't liking it, and the battery was super low. And since I do this for my job, Apple Log is beautiful. So I'm sure, obviously this is the selfie camera. You're not going to get like a super cinematic view, but I've been shooting everything here on Apple Log. I love the experience. And it helps integrate into my workflow a lot better. And this is my first demo of that. I'm using the on-camera mic and everything. Remember to be kind, rewind.